The Orah Slavers have their game plan down to a science. They figured out a long time ago that it is difficult to enslave a whole city or even a town. At those scales, you need an enforcer for every 10 slaves, and you need to maintain a good border, at least at the beginning. No, it is more economical to enslave an entire small colony world than try to round up individual cities. Not that this little moon scattered settlements could really be called cities by any civilized standard. Maybe in a generation or two. Who knows how long that would be for humans? I think I remember they have pretty fast reproductive cycles. I don't know. I don't really bother to learn much about the peoples themselves. It's depressing enough having to talk to them. The Orah dragged me along on their raids because us Quill are good with languages. So I have the misfortune to sit next to the greasy Grand Off himself, looking down on this cold, sandy moon. Even from orbit, we could see the moon pockmarked with green canyons like the face of an adolescent Orah, showing the scattered effects of the humans terraforming. The fleet descended, and we started our broadcast as lasers burned through the lone station orbiting the moon. I could hear my own recorded voice, small and apologetic, translating the Orah's decree. This system has been claimed by the Orah Confederate. All lives within it are deemed the rightful property of the Orah line of succession. Any attempts at resistance will be met with swift justice from on high. I sighed as the lengthy decree continued. I hated hearing my own voice played back. As my voice droned on, I watched the orbitals sliding out of the fleet's cargo ships. Thousands of them, the eyes and fists of the Orah. These were the reason that they could control entire worlds. Any attempt to establish a settlement outside of the decreed population zones will become an exciting new pocket of plasma. Soon enough, these orbital cannons would be picking off the factories and food reserves of the human settlements. No sentient species can survive for long without some kind of home, and the Orah ensured that the only home available was one that they controlled. A few of the stations dispersing into orbit were gruel-producing farms, just enough to support a fraction of the current population, bait to lead the workers to the factories and mineral collection sites that would drop from orbit. I waited, burping slightly, nauseated. This was my least favorite part, the negotiations. Next to me on his bath of a seat, the Grand Off was grinning to himself, nodding, his blubbery chins nodding along as well. If you haven't seen an Off before, I envy you, and will not sully your innocence with description. He loved the pleas for mercy, the desperate bargaining, that moment when the city started to burn, and the prey realized there were no other paths except for the cruel shackles laid before them. Some Orah treated raids as a job, an unfortunate evil, not the Grand Off. He lived for this moment, but as the hours slipped away, his grin soured. No call came from the humans. The factories and farms of their settlements burned brightly in the rich oxygen of the world being terraformed. Dark clouds of smoke were visible from orbit, scarring the moon, and still no messages arrived, neither defiance nor surrender. Finally, the rubbery Off broke. "Well," he shouted at the command deck, "what are they doing? Why haven't the scum said anything?" He hurled a half-full pouch of some warm, oily beverage at the nearest operations officer. The operations officer sat up at attention, blinking hot oil off its face. Their eye stalks were quivering, pointed toward the floor. The officer spoke quickly. They appear to be scattering. "Grand Off, we have successfully destroyed key infrastructure across the moon. No communications yet, and no military coordination, from what we can tell. Cowardly pests. Are they congregating at the quartering zones already?" "No, Grand Off," the officer said, blanching slightly. "That chosen settlement is intact, but there are signs of egress there as well. Like I said, pests." The Off spat the word. "They will return when their food runs out. Continue the deployment, and start landing the work equipment. Notify me when something happens." He lumbered to standing, difficult even in the thin false gravity, then turned and exited the bridge. "What?" he bellowed in frustration. The head of the officer fell to command deck floor wetly, cut off mid-grovel. I kept my face down, trying as hard as I could not to shake, attempting to blend in with the instruments along the command deck walls. "You!" The Grand Off pointed at a remaining officer seated at the intelligence desk. "Where are they?" He roared at the room at large. "Why can no one tell me where the entire population of this blighted moon went? Are you all blind or just stupid? The newly promoted officer shrunk into their seat, stammering for an explanation that would not result in the same sick end as his predecessor. It had been 27 days, and I still hadn't translated a single word. There were no enslaved humans to talk to. The cities had emptied. The factories gone cold. Within the first days, a few semi-permanent encampments were discovered in the wilderness and summarily erased from the face of the moon. This was the Orah's subtle encouragement to have survivors return to the work sites. Any gathering of peoples for an extended time was sure to be caught by the eyes in orbit. Yet after those few incidents, no new encampments were found, and no hungry workers appeared. The many eyes of the orbital cameras occasionally would find tracks in the sand. These were often from herbivore groups, but on the rare occasion when it was certain these were from humans, the orbital lasers would adjust, waiting to catch another human group using the path. The paths were never used again, and the lasers remained cold. I have conquered thousands of worlds, and will conquer thousands still. I think thousands was probably stretching the truth, but I wasn't going to say anything. Even the Regari, who fled to their seas, succumbed when we dropped depth charges onto their farms. Even the Shadowlarks, who hid in burrows, were eventually revealed by the gathered heat of their settlements. The Off gave an ultimatum. If we go 3 more days without a single factory online, I won't be giving you the easy and I gave this one, he said, gesturing at the headless corpse on the floor. I'll send a lot of you to command, and you can explain why we haven't sent a single container of product. The mind cutters that will make you wish I had gutted you myself. The Oft loved ultimatums. I thought the answer was obvious. We had finally found a species willing to die rather than be enslaved. Most species write poetry about their zeal in the face of death, but maybe this was finally a species who meant it. They had fled to caves and died. I could have chuckled if the Oft wouldn't have skewered me for it. 243 days. To my happy surprise, the humans were not dead, though many of the original Orah Bridge crew were at this point. A few improvised explosives harming the Orah factories were proof they were still out there. Still, 243 days is a long time, and it wasn't like they gave me a terminal. Not that I am complaining. Usually it would be non-stop translation of pleadings and punishments. The only translation I had done was a bit of graffiti placed on the settlement walls in the night by some unseen human. Honestly, I wasn't even needed for that. Anyone could have guessed at the meaning. Humans certainly have a lot of different words for their genitalia. Still, no towns or settlements were found. No new farms. How were they alive? Over that many days, I watched silently as the Off grew from proud to furious, and from furious to desperate. The clerk's staff stopped updating him on the expenses after one clerk died, being force-fed his own display tablet by the Oft. He knew, we all knew, we could not stay. Every day that went by without the factories running was a drain on the fleet's resources. The Grand Oft knew he was defeated. Never had the Orah Slavers so completely failed. With no profit from this moon, the losses on operation were enormous. The Grand Off knew something else too. My joy at the humans' defiance smothered as I started to realize the dark truth. With a great weight around my neck, I looked in the red rings of the Off's eyes as he stared at the little moon on the displays. The Orah could never allow word of their defeat to leave the system, however they had done it. However these humans had managed to survive without homes, without farms. If news of their tactics reached the Galactic commons, then the Orah's way of life would be gone. The hidden population of this moon was an existential threat to every Oft in the galaxy, and so I knew the order before it left the Oft's wet mouth. Recall the factory ships. Charge all orbital platforms. No targets were given, as none were needed. For all the time these humans had bought, no one can survive the death of the very ground they live on. I looked away from the monitors, not wanting to see what was going to happen to the spotted jewel of a moon I had grown familiar with over the long days. Grand Oft, came a voice on the desk, breaking the tense silence on the bridge. We are detecting a launch from the surface. Vermin to the end. It is too late. Destroy the craft. The Grand Off sounded tired. It had been days since he had screamed at anything. The orbital stations are not responding to our commands, and we detected 8 more launches. No, 24. 52. The panic rose in the officer's voice as the bridge staff started frantically mashing commands into the bridge controls. Burn them. None can escape. The off cried. I turned to watch the displays, but no beams of light came from the orbital platforms glittering around the moon. The only movement were the bright lines of the humans' chemical rockets taking off. The entire communications display was showing a blackout as the bridge crew frantically shouted at each other, trying to reconnect to their orbitals. Pure chaos. Out of caves and from under dense foliage the humans sprang. No two ships were the same. Primitive rockets made from mismatched pieces and prayers. A few ships exploded before they made it into orbit. 1 to 2 fell victim to the weapons on the Grand Off ship itself, but at least as many self-immolated from the hackshod make of the rockets. Still, others did make it. Hundreds of small craft, dragging themselves upward. As they burned into orbit, they slowly matched speeds of the orbital lasers, maneuvering to attach themselves to the satellites, boarding crews spilling out, pulling panels open and rewiring the weapons. The off found his screaming voice again, but it did little to help. The entire network was down, and the orbital platforms did not respond to Orah command. Eventually, he launched shuttles of his own from the command ship to reach the orbital platforms, but by then the weapons platforms were no longer property of the Oft. The last I heard from the Oft, he was yelling himself hoarse, ordering his fleet to flee. I quietly made my way to an escape pod in the chaos, and now here I am. So, nice to meet you all finally. I'm a big fan. General broadcast from Human Colony 0000368813, New Eden 2. Attached is a guidebook for dealing with the pig-faced slavers called the Orah. They suck at hide and seek if you just keep moving. Go full Nomad mode. Chapter 24 on subverting and piggybacking their communication systems is super juicy. Lots of issues in there that are going to be hard for them to fix without upgrading their whole fleet. Should be a viable strat for a while longer at least. PSTHX for the orbital farms. You dicks, your turn to go hide.